Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artists Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com.
Welcome to the Artists Index. I'm Scott Bishop, your host for this episode. I'm a New Bedford-based singer, songwriter, and sound sculptor making music under the name Scapegoat. I also present the live concert series Unexpected Music, which features South Coast musicians performing in non-traditional performing spaces around New Bedford. The In Focus podcasts are generously sponsored in part by Heavenly Spirits Importers and funded in part with grants from the New Bedford Cultural Council and the Fairhaven Cultural Council, local agencies supported by the Mass Cultural Council, a state agency. And now I'd like to invite our guests to introduce themselves, spell their name, and talk a little bit about who they are and what they do.
Thanks so much, Scott. So my name is Molly Oleary, which is Molly, and then last name Oleary is O''Leary. And as you said, I'm a singer-songwriter from New Bedford, Massachusetts, and I am also a school adjustment counselor in New Bedford and a yoga teacher and a cat owner and cat lover. And
wait,
yeah.
You own the cats? I thought they own you.
That's true. No. Cats own me.
Anyone who has cats knows the deal, that you live by their whim.
That's very accurate. They just jumped up on the table and I had to push them away.
We'll be asking them some questions too. We'll be interested in getting their thoughts about owning a human. Molly, I want to start with the very recent past, which is you were just in Indiana for a show, which seems like a really big deal, like out of state with a musician that you really love and respect. Can you tell us how that went and how that actually happened?
Yes. I guess I'll start with how it happened first and then talk about how it went. So it happened because I had the honor of opening up for Will Hoge for the first time in April 2nd, day before my birthday. It was a good day over at the Sonia live music venue in Cambridge, which is part of the Middle East. And that really happened because I just sent out mad emails to a lot of people, and you hear back from like 10% of them, but the ones I did hear back from included the booker for the Middle East. And then he asked me if I could pick out some artists who I thought I would be a good vibe to open for. And that included that show, which was Will Hoge and Jeff Ripley. And then their management said yes, which was crazy. We were super stoked. And then that show was really fun and went well. So Will asked me to fly out to Indiana this past weekend and open up for him again. So it's all felt like a dream, and I'm very grateful. And the show was a blast. The theater, it was called Ashta Theater in Jasper, Indiana. And it's all these amazing people who volunteer to keep the theater restored and running. And they were everyone was just super kind. I'm always grateful and happily surprised by the kindness that I've seen from people. And Will and the band are super supportive. And I posted a little video of some very kind things that he said about me and my music, which as a local artist, trying to work really hard to get my music out there. With that shout out he gave me on stage, it's just gonna keep me going for a long time. So it was great.
You're so busy. I mean, I think that's a big part of why you're able to make those connections, is you're putting yourself out there, which I think is a huge lesson for other musicians. It's one I could follow, because I think of during the 20 MI2 festival, I was going to ask you to play a show. And it's like, well, I'm already playing in the morning. I'm doing this thing in the afternoon, but I could do it. I'm like, I don't want to burn your voice out. But it's like 3 hours, in the afternoon, 3 hours in the evening. You're doing a lot of stuff up in Cambridge. You mentioned Sonia, which I'm an old school Cambridge punk rock guy. That used to be TT the Bears, and that whole kind of complex of the Middle East Club is amazing. I mean, that seems like that area has become kind of like a secondary home base, because it just strikes me that you're up in Cambridge a lot.
Yeah, I really like Cambridge a lot. And I have to say, I made those connections with the bookers at the Middle East through some emails. And then also, I know this really cool record label out of Boston called PB&J Records. And I originally met one of the guys who's involved with that, Carlin Tripp in New Bedford, like 10 years ago, I think at Cafe Arpeggio when that was still up and running, and at some other venues in New Bedford. So from that connection, he's gotten me involved in some songwriter events that are in the Boston and Cambridge area. So that's got my foot in the door in some places. And then meeting musicians who are more local to Cambridge, like Voodoo Sister is an artist from in the Cambridge area, and she invited me out to her show at Plow and Stars tonight, so I can do a set. So I'm happy to keep going up to Cambridge. It's a lot of gas, but it's all right. Worth it.
Hopefully you make enough to pay for the gas, which is just brutal these days. And just to let folks know, we're recording this on Thursday, June 23rd. So, this will be on the air whenever, but just to give you a sense of the time frame here, I want to backtrack to Indiana. This is just from my own personal curiosity. Did you check your guitar's luggage, or were you able to bring it on board? Because I've heard horror stories about traveling with guitars and you check it and it's not really the same after you checked it.
I was, I am one of those people that tries to avoid conflict at all costs, and I'm learning how to not do that. But when it comes to my guitar, it's like my baby. So
don't mess with Molly and her guitar, man. You're in trouble if you do.
Yeah, exactly. So when I got to the airport in Indiana, I, told the person at the counter for my airline right away. I was like, this cannot be checked. It will not do well being checked. It's very expensive. We need to get this on the plane. And he was so nice. Just want to give a shout out that American Airlines was super, super accommodating. And he was like, oh, we're going to board you. You're going to be the first person to board. And we're going to make sure that that's all set for you. And it was great.
Folks, travel with a guitar, make a complaint, and then get priority boarding. That's the Molly O'Leary rules for traveling.
That's it.
I want to acknowledge you because you were proactive and you knew a place where you had to take a stand. It might not be your default mode to deal with conflict, but you actually headed it off. And I think it's also important for folks to know, guitars can take a beating. I mean, I give my guitars quite a beating just playing them, but that's not the same as being chucked under, into the luggage area of a plane and being tossed around. That you have to go and perform with this instrument. This is kind of your part of your musical toolbox, and nothing can happen to that because that's your work. And I just want to acknowledge you for just standing up for that, because it's important. And it also gives some insight for maybe folks who are listening, hey, if I want to travel with my guitar, what's a way to deal with it? I wouldn't have thought of that. I'm going up to the counter and saying, hi, my guitar needs to join me on this flight. But that's beautiful. If I get a chance to play out somewhere that's, flying distance, now I know okay, that's what I do.
Yep. And I usually have a closet that's right in the front of the airline. So they put it in that closet. And on the way back, actually there was overhead space, so it worked there too, but there's two options. So you do not have to check it. Just tell them first thing.
Right on. Now that we've covered the very recent past, let's go back to the start. When did you start playing music?
I started taking lessons when I was 11 or 12. I think I was 11, and over at Symphony Music Shop in Dartmouth. And I started with guitar lessons with Rebecca Correa, and then that evolved into voice lessons and songwriting lessons. So we just kind of combined the guitar and singing and writing, and it was the best experiences with her. I learned so much from her.
Can you tell us what you learned? Things that really stuck out.
Yeah, I think that she really believed in me right away, which as 11, 12, and then teenager who was struggling a lot with believing in myself, to have her who I looked up to so much believe in me, that made a huge impact. And then also content wise, what she taught me, there was so much with the guitar of finger picking patterns and chords and ways to make a song your own. And then the writing piece, that was really, really immersive when we got into the writing piece, because she's an amazing songwriter. You should look her up, Rebecca Correa, if you don't know her. And, she just really talked about being authentic and emotional and telling a story, and how you can tell the story in the verses. And then, the main message in the chorus is one example of a possible structure to use. And I didn't write bridges for a long time, so she was like pushing me to write bridges in a yeah, there were a lot of examples, but she just was always like believing in me and supportive, and also pushing me to keep going.
And, how have you taken those lessons into the writing of your first record? Because that's a very strong, powerful record and a very cohesive set of songs.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that I've been writing, since I was a teenager, and was so nervous to put anything out officially as a CD. But thankfully, again, Rebecca and others were just pushing me to do that. And so I think that the way that she performs and the way that she sings and the way that she writes has influenced who I am as an artist a lot. It's hard to pinpoint maybe exact characteristics right now in this moment, but it was funny. I had my guitar tuned up by Matt Shamala, who's amazing. And he was like, oh, it reminded me a bit of Rebecca Correa. And I was like, oh, that was my music teacher growing up. And he was like, wow, I didn't know that. So it was cool. He said how it's different than Rebecca, but there were elements of it that were similar. And that's an honor for me to, reflect that some of the things that she's taught me back into my music. So I'm very grateful for everything she's taught me. And I definitely wouldn't be the artist I am without her.
Talk to us a bit about the writing of the record. I mean, the first record, in some respects, is kind of the easiest because you get to choose from all the songs you've ever written. But did you have a large body of songwriting that you were picking from and saying, this is going to be the record? How did you put it all together?
Yeah. So when COVID started, I did, my partner recorded an acoustic CD that we made in our apartment downtown New Bedford. So that was kind of my first putting my foot in the water of creating a theme for a record and actually picking songs to be on it. And that was a good experience, again, to put my foot in the water and understand what that was like. But then when I did Kickstarter and I found the musicians who were going to be in my band and everything, and found the producer in the studio where I was going to do Holding Space. Everything was new except one song was Reptilian Brain, which I put on that acoustic album. That first one I had recorded in my apartment, but that song was very important to me, and I wanted it to be on this I guess really debut album, Holding Space, for me, because it was a lot about processing different traumas I had been through, and it was important for me to have that song on the record. And then everything else was brand new that I wrote during quarantine. And it was for me, it was a meditative experience writing Holding Space, dealing with those difficult emotions that I would have otherwise pushed away. But now I was, deciding to being forced to deciding to face them and contemplate them and feel them, and thankfully use music to have an outlet to get it out through.
So really writing the songs for this record was partly therapy.
Yes. Oh, definitely. For sure.
Did you, write some lyrics and go, because they're very upfront and personal and they're recurring themes. Did you, occasionally think, holy smokes, do I actually want to say that? Do I want to put that out there? Was there any moment of hesitation around it?
Yeah, there are definitely doubts. I don't know if I was hesitating. I think I knew that no, I'm gonna do this. But there were doubts, just not knowing, and fears of how people were gonna respond to it or if they were gonna relate. But I just kept thinking of, how there are some people that I've connected with already who I've shared these with in my own circle. And I know that it's meant a lot to them. And then it means a lot to me to talk about themes surrounding mental health, of, anxiety and depression. And for myself, there are songs on it about recovering from an eating disorder that I struggled with for a while, and to be on the other side of it. And, I'm always in recovery. That's going to be a lifelong thing, but to feel confident in that recovery and to be able to sing about it and start conversations, that, feeling of talking about something really important overcame the fears and the doubts. So it was it kind of just, it was a bigger feeling than the doubts, which I'm thankful for.
Yeah, given that you're a school adjustment counselor, you work directly with kids. I mean, was there a part of it thinking also, this isn't just good for me to be talking about this stuff? Like people need to hear I'm going through this because maybe they're going through it too.
Yes, I think that being a therapist and working in the schools as a school adjustment counselor is really motivating. And I work with kindergarten through fifth grade, and they're such little or big lights, and they teach me a lot. And they go through really difficult, hardships that I don't fix those things, but I try to work with them and be there for them and give them tools to empower them, just as therapists have done for me. And I wrote a song on the album too called Our Little School that is about my experiences with them. And I agree. I do think that overall, thinking about them and how, when I was a kid, I would have wanted music like this and did have music like this to help me get through things. It was very motivating and helpful.
Are you able to bring your music or just music in general into your job in any way?
Yes. I keep one of my little guitars there in case, there's ever music in the lessons or impromptu jams. But we also, one example is that at the end of this year, we did a end of the year video, and the whole school actually sang that song I wrote for them, Our Little School. Nice. And we had 4 singers that also had like mics. They were 4th graders who they just knew every single word of the song. It was adorable. And so that meant a lot to be able to sing the song I wrote for them with them. And I'm also grateful that the teachers and my principal and everyone, they just have really pushed the song to be, part of mindful moments in the classroom or part of, assemblies and things like that.
One thing that really jumped out lyrically across the record is there is recurring imagery around body image. There's also kind of recurring themes of, you're enough, I'm enough, am I enough? I mean, was that just something that came about as you were writing? Was there any conscious effort to say, I should really try and connect these songs, create a thread through them?
Yeah, that came about accidentally. And at first I thought about changing it. Like I talk about and I wonder, I say will I ever be enough? Will I ever be loved? And then in Our Little School, I'm telling the kids, that you are enough and that you are loved. And that happened accidentally. And I thought about changing it to avoid repetitiveness, but then I kind of liked it. I realized that, I'm telling the kids this, and that also can be a reflection of me and my younger self that, I'm sort of writing about here in those darker times that I was in. So it just connected in a way that I actually liked. So I ended up keeping it in.
Yeah, it's something that I like very much. And I want to applaud you for ignoring that instinct. I have to make a distinct set of lyrics every time. They are all distinct lyrics, but the occasional line that echoes something else is actually really powerful. It's something I love about the lyric writing on the record. Can you take me just generally through your process? Are you a words first? Is it music and words at the same time? Do you need to have a song structure before you write lyrics? Is there a set process?
Sometimes it's different, but I think for this album and most of my songwriting, it's usually the words first. I get ideas throughout the day, someone will say something to me or I'll have a thought and I just feel it in my heart center real deep, and it connects. And then I'm okay, well, if that connects with me a lot, maybe it'll connect with others too. So I jot down ideas just in the notes in my phone or in my journal. And then I have a bajillion of them. And then I'll go back later and see what, stands out to me. And I'll usually at least write a verse and a chorus first, and then I'll go to my guitar and start. I might take something. Sometimes I do create ideas on the guitar and I'll just save them and I try to match them up, but it's usually always the words first, a verse and a chorus, and then I'll go to the guitar.
At the point you go to the guitar, is that also the point where you basically, okay, now I need a second verse, now I need a bridge?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel I'll probably get halfway there for the most times of verse chorus, and then I'll set it to something on the guitar, verse chorus, and then it's kind of easier to hear it because I know the way that the verse might generally sound and the chorus might generally sound. So it's easier to come up, okay, second verse, where do I want this story to go? And then if I am putting in a bridge, or sometimes my bridges turn into outros, I don't know why, but that happens. And that happens in a lot of songs, happens in like Come to the Coven, and there's like a whole handful, Our Little School, which I just, sometimes I overthink it, like, no, I have to go back to the chorus and resolve it. But then I'm just like, I don't know, it just feels natural. So I'm not going to force it.
I like that because I mean, so much of songwriting and enjoying a song is the feeling of it. Like sometimes you can apply logic to it, and the logic actually takes away the magic. It's like how sometimes you might write a line in a song and like, I don't know what that means, but that sounds really good. That says something and I can't really pin it down. I just appreciate you going with that instinct. But it's also interesting how you basically create a structure through writing a verse and a chorus so that you've actually created this kind of almost intentional groundwork for a song, because that's not a convention. I mean, it's not a way that I'm familiar with, but it strikes me as like a really smart, efficient way to do it, because now like I actually have a framework and an idea of a story rather than I'm here with the guitar fumbling around trying to figure out all of it. I've got some kind of framework to work in.
Yeah, and I didn't even realize that I was doing that. I think that I don't know, someone asked me how I write songs like recently, sometime in the past few months. And then I was like, oh, I don't know. So now I've been like thinking about it more as I'm doing it. And so I felt a little bit more prepared for that question, but it just kind of has happened naturally of that process. So, I mean, I don't know if it'll always work, but I'll keep it around while it does.
You know, as someone who works full time, I know, you know, the school year just ended, but
Yeah.
how do you squeeze all the music in when you have a job, you're married, it's like you're super busy. How do you find enough hours in the day? I see you gigging so much.
Yeah. I wish there were extra days in the week. It's tough. I'm very happy that I love my job at the school. I am happy that the school year ended though. I just needed a break. Like I could feel myself kind of running on empty. And I've thought about like, you know, for this year coming, I just need to be very intentional and thoughtful about like, when I'm working at the school, when I'm sleeping, when I'm spending times with the people I love, when I'm gigging and everything like that. But at the same time, you know, I try to take as many gigs as I can, and I really love playing. And whether there's, you know, 5 people there or 100 people there, like I just love connecting with people, and I love playing as a duo with John Fernandez, and I love playing with my band. I love going to see my friends play music. Like if I have time off, I go see my friends play music. So it doesn't feel like a job, the music part. So I think that's why I just keep going. Again, I was running a little bit on empty of lack of sleep this past couple of weeks, but overall it does feel good because the music and the playing feels good. And I always want to check in with myself and make sure that that's true. I don't want to, you know, just take, like, I don't ever take like gigs that are full cover songs or things like that, because that doesn't feel good for me. I don't mind throwing in covers like 50-50 or something like that. But I do pick gigs where I make sure I can play my originals, because that really fills me up a lot.
Got it. Was this year particularly taxing because it was the first year that really kids could be back at school full time? You know, I know from my standpoint, I have 2 kids, that, you know, it's a very different experience when the kids are physically in school versus they're trying to do the hybrid and trying to, you know, spend 3 days online. I mean, how did that impact you in terms of, I mean, just energy and ability to do stuff? Because the pandemic was one set of energy, and then I wouldn't say post pandemic, but where we're at now is a very different kind of energy.
Yeah, and actually I went to undergrad for social work. I went to grad school for social work, and then I went right into my job at Rodman Elementary as a school adjustment counselor. And my first year at Rodman was when COVID hit. Oh. So I had not, so it was a very weird year to start. And so I had never gone through a year start to finish until this year. I mean, the first year, you know, almost half of it was when COVID first hit, which was very stressful. And then last year it was hybrid. It was like a mix, you know, kids weren't in full time. That was also strange. And then this year was a new strangeness where COVID's still going on. We have to be careful. We, you know, are wearing masks. We're doing the best we can. But it was, it was busy, but I liked to be in person better. I felt like I could connect with the kids more. I've had some back problems over the past couple of years, and I think that it's more so due to being on the screen so much, you know, and I was never used to that. I'm always like going around doing things and doing yoga and walking and whatnot. So I think that it was better for my mental health to be in person. I think it was better for my students' mental health to be in person. So of course there were new things to balance, like just the full timeness of it, but I liked it better for sure.
I want to get back to the record and specifically to the arrangements on the record, because what's interesting with your songs is I've heard you play them solo acoustic. I've heard you play them, you know, duo guitar and bass with Chris, you know, guitar and electric with John, full band. And I'm just wondering, you know, through all those different variations, how did you and the band collectively come to arrangements on these songs that really could be performed in any number of configurations?
Mm-hmm. That I have to say, I have to give so much credit to the band and to the producer. So for the band on the record, I play with so many amazing musicians. And on the record, there was John Fernandez on lead guitar, Rob Massoud on bass, and then my brother, Tom Oleary on drums. And we also had Bree Vieira do strings on some songs, which was very beautiful. And then John Mayhew helped a lot with arrangements as well as those musicians themselves. You know, I really didn't have a lot of ideas. I had some ideas like floating. John Fernandez and I talked about it, and I knew I wanted floating to be like ethereal and whatnot. But for the most part, I didn't have a lot of ideas. I didn't know what that process would be like yet. So I really asked the musicians and John Mayhew to be like, what do you hear? Like, can we talk about different ideas? And then I can, you know, we can decide as a group. Like I wanted it to be more of a band and a group effort. And they just came in with so many creative ideas. So I have to give a huge shout out and thank you to them really for thinking of different arrangements for the album. It was great.
This record also has a really cool sonic palette, which I imagine like that's a group effort as well. I mean, were there sounds that, you know, you heard like that's not quite right, or there would be moments where that's magic that we need to do that?
Yes, definitely. I'm trying to remember. There were a couple songs where the original ideas, again, person who does not like conflict, I was feeling uncomfortable, but I did finally say like, no, I don't think it's working. Like you try something else. And I'm happy for that learning experience. Now I think I would be fine just saying like, yeah, guys, it's not vibing. Let's try something else. But it was awkward at first, but I did that. It was good. And then, you know, we would try new things for that. But off the top of my head, I remember like I told John Fernandez and John Mayhew, like for floating, how, you know, I was listening to Phoebe Bridgers and I love Phoebe Bridgers, and she and her musicians use cool like noises on the album that, you know, are often created with guitar, but it sounds like very ethereal and outer spacey. And John Fernandez just like, I mean, that's just the kind of player he is too. Like he plays guitar, but he makes his guitar sound like these crazy noises that I didn't even know were possible. So he understood what I meant right away. And that song just was easy. It just fell right into place. It was great.
So you described a vibe in that case, and he translated it sonically.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I love the sounds because I'm a guitar pedal nut.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've been spending the last 5 years looking for ways to make my guitar sound like it's not a guitar. Like, oh, could it be a synthesizer? Could it sound like it's running through a blender? Which is, you know, it's definitely a rabbit hole you can go down. I'm just really impressed with John's mastery of all those tools because, you know, there is a tremendous variety in guitar sound, and it's not easy to dial in different sounds like that. I'd like to ask, how did you connect with John? Because he's a very important part of your band.
Yes, he's a very important part of my band. He was in a couple of different ways. He teaches guitar over at Double Bar Music Shop, which my sister-in-law, Kelsey, runs. It's a beautiful music shop out in Westport. And so I take lessons there at times. Like if I have a question about like a song or a vocal issue or something like that, I'll go to Kelsey or her mom, Marcel. And so I would see him there. And then also he is very good friends with my brother, Tom, and they're in a band together. And so I knew him from a couple different ways. And I honestly did not think he was going to say yes. Like I texted my brother and I was like, do you think John was the first person I asked, I think even before my brother. And I was like, I really need John Fernandez on this album. Like, he's the exact player that I want. And I was like, do you think he'll say yes? And my brother was like, I don't know. You can ask him. Maybe. I know he's busy, but no harm in asking. So Tom sent me his number. And then he texted me back like instantly and was like, absolutely, send me everything. And at that point, I probably had like half the album done, or more, I think. I don't even know. I had 17 songs I had to pick from and narrow it down to 13. And I sent him all videos and lyrics through a Google Doc with all explanations of what the songs mean to me, which I think he said was helpful, just to know what they all, really mean and what I was thinking while writing it. And then, wow, talking about someone who works hard, he works so hard, and he came up with like so many parts for every single song, and we would rehearse for hours and hours and hours, and it just like clicked right away. I'm very grateful for that.
That was a really smart move to write out what the songs mean, though, because then you help put him in the headspace of tapping into what's key to the song, as opposed to just here's some acoustic demos I did, what do you think? I mean, I think it's a great way of communicating your vision, so that somebody can kind of tap into that vision and play a part that maybe you wouldn't have expected, but is somehow perfect.
Yeah, I didn't know it was going to be helpful for him. I think I did it because I just it just meant, I don't know, I felt maybe embarrassed and vulnerable about sharing the song. So I wanted to explain myself and what they meant. And then I didn't realize it was going to impact how he wrote on the guitar for it. So that was really nice experience.
How about the sequencing of the record? I mean, you record 13 songs. Do you have a vision of the flow of the album once you had those 13 songs chosen?
I knew the only thing I knew to start was that I wanted to have 13 be the 13th song. Like, my song is called 13, written as Roman numeral 13 for a few different reasons, but I knew that I wanted that one to be the last one. So I had the final song, but then I had to fill everything else in. And I actually had my friends from the Heron, which is a really cool nonprofit and yoga studio and nature conservation place, in Westport and Fall River too. And so I had those friends, which were pivotal in this whole album. I mean, they were the first ones to listen. I played every song from the album and heard their feedback and whatnot. And then we came to Allison's apartment and we wrote down all the names of the final 13 on pieces of paper and ripped them up. And then we just tried out different orders with the song until when we had the final one. I think we just were all unanimously in agreement, and it felt good.
Nice. I want to ask you a question about vocals. So first of all, one of my observations about your singing, you're a phenomenal singer, but what I love is that frequently your vocals are almost whispered, and it has this really amazing effect of pulling people in, so that when you kind of start letting loose, there's more power. Is that conscious, or is this just a style that organically developed?
It is. Yeah, it is conscious. I think about dynamics a lot, and I think about that is intentional. I do think about, like drawing people in and what I would want to hear, and people I admire who might do elements of that at time in their music. And so I'm not a belter, like I taken a lot of vocal lessons, and I still take vocal lessons at time, and belting is just not natural for my anatomy. And I'm not, there are technical things that I can do to maybe sound like I am more belting, but long story short, I don't want to push that and be like a pop artist, even if that's popular, because it's going to hurt my voice and it's not going to be authentic. So I was thinking about what is authentic to me and what feels well anatomically in my vocal cords, and also is like a creative, spin on what I want to put through. So that kind of came out. And there are times when I literally whisper, and I remember I told John May, the producer, who's incredible, like, no, I want to whisper here. And he was like, you want to whisper? And I was like, yeah, let's just try it out. And there are times when it didn't work, but then there are times when it really did work and it was cool. Like in Dear Lewis and Floating, there were times when it just really clicked. So I was happy that I was starting to take more risks in the studio and try stuff like that out.
I want to highlight Floating because not only are the vocals great, but you talked about that ethereal sound. What's interesting about John's guitar sound is it sounds to me like distortion and feedback, but it's covered in a lot of reverb. So it kind of takes some of the edge off and gives it that spaciness. That's just an observation I wanted to make because I love the marriage of vocal and guitar sound in that track in particular.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that one was cool. And then I like just heard a harmony for it right away, and we ended up keeping most of the harmonies on the recording in it because it just added to that vibe. So that was my favorite one. One of my favorites to write and record in the studio because it just, it clicked. And I think that, when you get a sound that reflects the sound that you authentically want to be, and it doesn't feel forced or anything, it meant a lot to me.
How long did it take to track the record? I mean, 13 tracks with a full band.
That's a good question. Time-wise, it was spread out. So it took a bit of time. It probably could have been done shorter if we went in every single day and, really on it. But I think for our first album all together, it was probably good that it was spread out so we could have time to like have some space from it and then go back and listen and see what was working and what wasn't. So I think that John and I started to rehearse in October, and then I was already talking to John Mayu in October, but I don't think it was until February or March that we got in the studio. And I think that we finished in July, and then the album, I wanted to put the album out in the summer, but I don't think it came out until
October.
Maybe? Yeah,
that was the fall.
Yep.
And I want to ask about vocal care because I think about that day that you were doing 6 hours or close to 6 hours of singing. How do you take care of your voice when you have that kind of time commitment and you're doing that much singing?
Yeah, I drink a lot of water, and then I try to get as much sleep as I can. And then there are like these vocal exercises that Kelsey and Marcel at Double Bar have taught me called SOVTs. The long word is semi-occluded vocal tracks exercises. You can like look it up on YouTube, and they're like very therapeutic ways to take care of your voice that I use a lot. And some of them are lip trills, like literally like
Oh wow.
yeah, and I do those a lot, and people, my friends and my family are like, they either love it or they're like, oh my God, not another lip trill. Or there's like things where you put a straw in like a bottle of water and you like blow bubbles while you sing different, warm-ups or roller coaster things. So those I find to be really therapeutic for my voice.
Thank you for the tip because I need to take better care of my voice now that I'm a wee bit older.
I mean, but after the 6-hour day, I was definitely feeling it. And the next day I had another gig. So after that, I like texted some people I was supposed to see, and I like canceled some things. And I was like, I need vocal rest for the next few days. So.
Are you writing stuff for the next record? I mean, is it too early to talk about that? Because I know Holding Space has only been out less than a year, but are you in writing mode at this point?
Yeah, I definitely want to keep promoting Holding Space, of course, but I am in writing mode. I've been playing one new song out at times, just because I'm very excited about it, and it's cool to give people a little bit of a taste of what the future will hold. But I probably have like 6 or 7 new songs, I think, that I'm just like holding on to. And then I even have a few B-sides that never got on the album for Holding Space, and there's especially 1 or 2 that I'm like, if it fits in the new vibe, I might put it in, because I love those songs. It just like didn't fit in the theme for Holding Space as much as I wanted. So we'll see if those make it on there.
And at this point, you probably don't have an idea of the theme for the next one. It's just like you've got Holding Space, you're living in that space right now, musically.
I have apparently use Google Docs a lot. I have a Google Doc with some potential new songs and potential album names and themes.
Nice.
Yeah, no, I have ideas going. I'm excited. It's gonna be it's similar in the sense of it's like talking about personal stuff, because apparently I just like to overshare in all my albums.
Next record's called TMI. Hope you like it.
But it's new topics and new content that I think every time I'm like, no, this is too vulnerable to talk about and too vulnerable to share. But I think that again, I I'll overcome those fears with the positive, that comes out from it when you connect with people about it. So I think I'll get there.
Do your Black Cats help you with your songwriting? You knew that I was going to bring the Black Cats in the equation, and I'm wondering, like, are they a helpful audience?
Oh, they are the sweetest. Yeah, they actually really love the sound of the guitar and singing. So they usually will just like chill right in front of like wherever I'm sitting, and they seem like they're listening from my perspective. So they like music. They like to eat capos and tuners.
Nice.
Yeah. But no, actually, I don't think this is too much of a giveaway, but in one of the songs I mentioned my Black Cats. So they're a big inspiration.
And did you consciously adopt Black Cats? Because we know the whole superstition around Black Cats. I love them personally, and I love seeing people adopt them. I know our friend Sarah Donner and Michael McLean love seeing Black Cats get adopted too, because I adopted one from them. I mean, was it conscious or just like, those are the cats for me, no other particular reason?
So when it just felt like, not to be corny, but it just felt so meant to be, which I'm sure a lot of people, when they get their pets, it just happens. And my partner and I had been talking about getting cats, but we were going to wait. But then Sarah, I think I was just talking to Sarah, and then she said how she had these 2 sibling cats, and then I met them and I fell in love with them, and it was October, and like I wanted my 2 little black cats for my witchy little household, and Halloween was coming around and whatnot. But I actually didn't realize until after the fact, like all the superstitions, that go around it. And I was talking to my friend Yaya, who's also a singer-songwriter from the area, and she has a black cat, and she was just saying that how people like do not adopt them because they think it's bad luck, and that just broke my heart. So now I'm a very big advocate, even more so, of black cats, because they are so sweet and so special.
It's an absolutely ridiculous superstition. Our cat Peptide is actually like a little audience for me.
Yeah.
So if you're a musician, adopt a black cat, you'll have an immediate audience at home. And of course, someone who will eat your capos and swat at your strings and stuff, but you got to take the good with the bad.
Oh yeah.
Molly, is there anything we haven't talked about that you'd like to cover?
That was super thorough. I guess I just want to, thank you so much for doing this. And you work so hard to, promote local artists and musicians and in our community. And it means a lot. So everyone should go check out your music because it's super cool and ethereal, sonic sounds, and I'm obsessed with it. So I'm grateful for this conversation and for you.
Well, we're not done because I have one remaining set of questions to ask you. I call them the 5 queries of unknown origin because I grew up loving Blue Oyster Cult. That's the only reason they're called that. But they're just 5 questions I want to ask every musician who agrees to have this conversation. Can you recall your first musical memory?
Yeah, it was probably my first musical memory probably would have been watching my older brother, Tom Oleary, play drums. Like when he was in middle school, he would have, these really cool punk bands, and he would put baby powder on his drums and make it all as if it was like smoke. It was wild, and I just wanted to be him. It was great.
That's a great substitute for dry ice. Just put baby powder on the drums and just beat them up.
Yep.
Beautiful. What is one record that you would have to take to Desert Island?
There are so many, but probably Jagged Little Pill by Alanis Morissette. That was a huge inspiration to me.
All right. Speaking of inspirations, who's a super sneaky secret influence nobody would expect?
Oh, that's a good question. That no one would expect.
Doesn't necessarily have to be musical. That could be some other medium, but someone who, like they hear your music like, really? And then, yeah.
Oh, actually, well, now that you say it like that, people are often surprised when I say, Alanis Morissette, and they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then I say Green Day, and they're like, really?
What?
Like Green Day and punk music were like, especially because of my brother, but Green Day and punk music were huge, huge inspirations to me. Like that's all I would listen to all day long, even though my music isn't punk. But so maybe that's sort of surprising.
Yeah, beautiful. Who is a musician, living or dead, you would love to have in your band?
A musician, living or dead, who I would like to have in my band would be right now. Currently, I've been listening to a lot of Phoebe Bridgers. So in the moment, maybe Phoebe Bridgers. I think that the content and like the sonic sounds of her music are inspiring. So we'll go with that.
All right. And last question, what is your South Coast happy place?
Oh, like a place in South Coast that I like to go to?
Yep.
Oh, nice. Okay. I'm always in New Bedford. Anywhere in New Bedford is beautiful. There are so many, restaurants, venues, super cool places that I like to go to. But if I'm like upset and I need to, go take a break somewhere, I'll go to like the ocean down in the South End in New Bedford and just hang out there. So that'd probably be my happy space.
Beautiful. Molly, thank you so much for this conversation. It's really been amazing. I'm looking forward to seeing you out there playing, and also to whatever you do next. You are awesome.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Scott. And I can't wait to see you out there playing soon too.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
I'm just going to do a little outro here for the benefit of the art. If you want to hop off, you are welcome to. If you want to hang on and chat a little longer, that's great too. All right. Thanks for joining us for another In Focus podcast, which is generously sponsored in part by Heavenly Spirits Importers and funded in part with grants from the New Bedford Cultural Council and the Fairhaven Cultural Council, local agencies supported by the Mass Cultural Council, a state agency. I'm Scott Bishop, and thanks for listening to the Artist Index.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Be the artist you believe you are, and let's take care of each other out there.